Hey everyone, welcome back. It's late, you're tired, and honestly, same. Tonight, we're drifting back to 1947, to one of the most chaotic, tragic, and weirdly inevitable disasters in modern history. We're talking about the Partition of India. Specifically, we're looking at what happened to families who had the audacity to be both Hindu and Muslim at the same time. Families who woke up one morning to find out that loving each other was now, apparently, a political problem. So get comfortable, dim the lights, let this wash over you like a very depressing lullaby, because we're going to spend the next hour and a half wandering through the wreckage of August 1947, when the British decided to leave India in the most chaotic way possible, and millions of people paid the price. Let's start with the basics. By the summer of 1947, British India was being carved into two brand new countries, India, which would be mostly Hindu, and Pakistan, which would be mostly Muslim. The border between them, called the Radcliffe Line, named after a British lawyer who'd never even been to India before, was announced on August 17th, 2 days after independence, because of course it was. Now, here's the thing about drawing a border through one of the most densely populated regions on Earth. People lived there, and not in neat, religiously segregated blocks. Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs had been living side by side for centuries. They shared streets, markets, water wells. They married each other. Not all the time, obviously, but enough that when someone decided to split the subcontinent along religious lines, a lot of families suddenly had a problem. Let's talk about those families, the ones where a Hindu man had married a Muslim woman, or a Muslim man had married a Hindu woman, or a Sikh family had a Muslim daughter-in-law. These weren't rare. Interfaith marriages happened, especially in urban areas, especially among educated or progressive families. And in the summer of 1947, every single one of those families had to make an impossible choice. Do you stay together and pick a side? Do you split up? Do you lie about your religion? Do you convert? Do you run? There were no good answers. Some families tried to stay together by moving to whichever side made the most sense. A Hindu man married to a Muslim woman might take his whole family to Pakistan, figuring that his wife's religion would protect them. A Muslim man with a Hindu wife might head to India, hoping that his in-laws could vouch for him. Sometimes this worked, often it didn't. Because here's the problem. Once the violence started, and it started, nobody cared about nuance. Mobs didn't stop to ask if you were in a mixed marriage. They didn't care if your husband was Muslim but you were Hindu. They saw a name, a face, a way of dressing, and they made a decision. And that decision was usually very bad for you. Let's talk about Lahore. Lahore, in what would become Pakistan, had a huge Hindu and Sikh population before partition. In August 1947, the city descended into absolute chaos. Entire neighborhoods were set on fire. Families were dragged out of their homes, and if you were a Hindu or Sikh in a Muslim-majority area or a Muslim in a Hindu or Sikh-majority area, your odds of survival dropped significantly. Now imagine you're a Hindu woman married to a Muslim man. Your husband's family lives in Lahore. You've lived there for 10 years. You have children. Then the violence starts. Your husband insists you'll be safe because his family is Muslim, but your own family, back in Amritsar, is begging you to come home. They say it's not safe. They say you need to leave. But leaving means abandoning your husband, your in-laws, your children's father. What do? Some women stayed. Some of them survived. Some of them didn't. There's a recorded account, one of many, of a Hindu woman in Lahore who refused to leave her Muslim husband. When a mob came to their house, her husband hid her in a back room. The mob found her anyway. They dragged her out into the street. Her husband tried to stop them. They killed him first. Then they killed her. Their children, by the way, were taken by neighbors. What happened to them after that, no one really knows. Other families tried to split up temporarily, thinking they'd reunite once things calmed down. Things did not calm down. A Muslim man in Delhi might send his Hindu wife and children to her family in a Hindu-majority area, figuring they'd be safer there. He'd stay behind to protect his property, his business, whatever. Then the trains stopped running. The roads became war zones. Letters didn't get through. Months would pass. Years. Some families never saw each other again. There's stories, so many stories, of children who grew up not knowing where their parents were. A 5-year-old girl sent to her Hindu grandmother's house in Amritsar in July 1947. Her Muslim father promised he'd come get her in a few weeks. He never came. She spent the rest of her life not knowing if he was dead, or if he'd made it to Pakistan, or if he simply decided she was too dangerous to reclaim. And here's the thing, even if you survived the initial violence, even if you made it to the right side of the border, you weren't safe, because now you had to prove you belonged. Let's say you're a Muslim man who stayed in India because your Hindu wife didn't want to leave her family. Congratulations, you're now a suspect. Your neighbors might report you, the police might question you, local Hindu nationalist groups might decide you're a threat. And if they find out your wife is Hindu, that doesn't make you safer, it makes you a traitor. A man who corrupted a Hindu woman, a man who needs to be dealt with. The same thing happened in Pakistan, just in reverse. Hindu men married to Muslim women were accused of corrupting Muslim women, of polluting the new Islamic State. Some were forced to convert, some were forced to leave, some just vanished. And then there were the children. Oh, the children. If you were the child of a mixed marriage in 1947, your life became a nightmare of identity and paperwork. Were you Hindu or Muslim? Well, that depended on who was asking and what they planned to do with the answer. In India, a child with a Muslim father and a Hindu mother was legally considered Muslim. In Pakistan, it was the same. Father's religion determined the child's religion. But socially, it was much messier. A child who looked too Muslim in India or too Hindu in Pakistan could be targeted. A child with the wrong name could be pulled off a train and killed. Some families changed their children's names. A boy named Ahmed became Anil. A girl named Priya became Praveen. Parents coached their children on how to answer questions, what to say if someone asked their religion, how to pray if someone demanded proof, how to lie convincingly enough to stay alive.
There's an account from a survivor, a man who was 7 years old in 1947, whose mother was Hindu and father was Muslim. They were trying to get from Delhi to Lahore. On the train, a group of Sikh men came through the compartment, checking for Muslims. His father told him to stay quiet, to pretend to be asleep. The men asked his mother where her husband was. She said he'd gone to the bathroom. They waited. When his father came back, they pulled him off the train. The boy and his mother made it to Lahore. His father didn't. The boy grew up in Pakistan, raised by his mother, who converted to Islam because it was easier than explaining. He never used his Hindu middle name again. Let's drift over to the issue of conversion, because once partition started, a lot of interfaith families were pressured or forced to convert. If you were a Hindu woman married to a Muslim man in Pakistan, you'd be told to convert to Islam, sometimes by your in-laws who were worried about their own safety, sometimes by neighbors, sometimes by the government. The new Pakistani state wasn't officially forcing conversions, but it wasn't stopping them either. And if converting meant you could keep your children, keep your home, maybe even keep your life, a lot of women converted. The same thing happened in India, just flipped. Muslim women married to Hindu men were pressured to convert to Hinduism. Some did it willingly, some did it to survive, some refused and paid for it. And here's the darkest part. Even if you converted, even if you did everything right, it didn't guarantee safety, because mobs don't care about paperwork. There's a story from Amritsar, a city that saw some of the worst violence, about a Muslim woman married to a Sikh man. She'd lived there for 15 years. She'd converted to Sikhism when they got married. She dressed like a Sikh woman, spoke Punjabi, celebrated Sikh festivals. In August 1947, a mob came to her neighborhood. Someone told them there was a Muslim woman in one of the houses. They found her. Her husband begged them to leave her alone. He showed them her conversion papers. They didn't care. They killed her in front of him. Her husband spent the rest of his life trying to find out who betrayed them. He never did. Now let's talk about the families who tried to hide, because some interfaith families didn't run, didn't split up, didn't convert. They just tried to stay invisible. In Delhi, there were Muslim families with Hindu relatives who hid them in their homes for weeks, sometimes months. A Hindu daughter-in-law might hide her Muslim in-laws in a back room, sneaking them food, lying to neighbors. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes someone noticed. Sometimes the neighbors stayed quiet out of decency. Sometimes they didn't. There's an account from a Hindu woman in Old Delhi who hid her Muslim husband's brother and his family in their house for 3 months. Every day she went to the market, bought food, smiled at the neighbors, pretended everything was fine. Every night she locked the doors and prayed no one would come knocking. They survived, barely. When it was finally safe enough to leave, her brother-in-law's family went to Pakistan. They never spoke again. Not because of anger, just because the distance, the trauma, the sheer weight of what had happened made it impossible. Other families tried to blend in by lying about their background. A Muslim man married to a Hindu woman might claim he was Hindu too. He'd learned the prayers, the rituals, the right things to say. He'd change his name. He'd let his beard grow or shave it off depending on what seemed safer. And it worked sometimes until someone from his old neighborhood recognized him. Let's talk about what happened to the children of these mixed families, because while adults could sometimes navigate the horror through lies, conversions, or sheer luck, children were often just confused. Imagine being 8 years old. Your father is Muslim, your mother is Hindu. You celebrate both Eid and Diwali. You eat at both the mosque and the temple. Then, in August 1947, adults start screaming at each other about borders and bloodlines and who belongs where. And you, an 8-year-old child, are suddenly supposed to pick a side. Some parents made the choice for their children. A Muslim father might take his half-Hindu children to Pakistan, telling them they were Muslim now, that their mother's religion didn't matter. A Hindu mother might take her half-Muslim children to India, insisting they were Hindu, that their father's background was irrelevant. The children went along with it, because what else could they do? But here's what nobody talks about. These children grew up fractured. They grew up knowing that half of their identity was now illegal, or shameful, or dangerous to acknowledge. They grew up with family members they'd never see again on the other side of a border that might as well have been the moon. There's a documented case from Karachi about a girl named Meher. Her father was Muslim, her mother was Hindu. In 1947, her father decided the family would move to Pakistan. Her mother's family begged her not to go. They said she'd be in danger. She went anyway because her husband insisted. They made it to Karachi safely. Her mother lasted 6 months. She couldn't handle being cut off from her family, her language, her community. She became depressed, stopped eating, stopped speaking. She died in early 1948. Meher was 9 years old. Her father remarried to a Muslim woman this time. Meher grew up in Pakistan, but she never felt Pakistani. She never felt like she belonged. When she was older, she tried to visit India to find her mother's family. The visa process took 3 years. When she finally made it to Delhi, her grandmother was already dead. Her aunts and uncles treated her like a stranger. She was too Pakistani for them now. She went back to Karachi and never tried again. And Meher was the lucky ones. She survived. A lot of children didn't.
Because here's another horror. During partition, thousands of children were separated from their families. Some were lost in the chaos. Some were orphaned when their parents were killed. Some were deliberately abandoned because parents thought they'd be safer on their own, or because parents couldn't afford to feed them anymore, or because a mixed-race child was too dangerous to keep. And once a child was separated, finding them again was nearly impossible. Let's say you're a Muslim mother in Amritsar in August 1947. The violence is getting worse. You have 3 children. Your husband is already dead. You're trying to get to Pakistan, but the trains are full, the roads are blocked, and everywhere you go there are men with swords and guns. You make a decision. You leave your youngest child, a 2-year-old daughter, with a Hindu neighbor. You tell the neighbor you'll come back for her. You tell your daughter you'll be right back. You get on a train with your 2 older children. The train makes it to Lahore. You spend the next 10 years trying to find your daughter. You never do. What happened to that daughter? Maybe the neighbor raised her. Maybe she was taken to an orphanage. Maybe she was adopted by a Hindu family and raised as a Hindu, never knowing she was born Muslim. Maybe she died in the chaos and no one bothered to record it. Multiply that story by thousands, tens of thousands, because the estimates vary, but somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 children went missing during partition, just vanished. The governments of India and Pakistan eventually set up recovery programs. Teams of social workers would go to orphanages, refugee camps, villages, looking for lost children. They'd try to match children with parents who'd filed missing persons reports. Sometimes it worked. Usually it didn't. And even when it did work, it was complicated, because let's say they found your daughter. She's 7 now. She's been living with a Hindu family for 5 years. She doesn't remember you. She doesn't speak Urdu anymore. She prays to Hindu gods. Do you take her back? Do you rip her away from the only family she knows? Do you force her to relearn a religion and a language and an identity she doesn't remember? Some parents said yes. They took their children back, brought them to Pakistan or India, tried to reintegrate them. It rarely went well. The children were traumatized. They didn't understand why they were being moved again. They cried for their adoptive parents. Some ran away. Some spent their whole lives resenting the parents who rescued them. Other parents saw their lost children, now happy and settled with new families, and made the agonizing choice to leave them there. Because what's worse, taking a child away from the only stability they've known, or abandoning them a second time? There's no good answer. There never was. Let's drift over to the issue of abductions, because during partition, women and children from mixed families were especially vulnerable to being kidnapped. If you were a Hindu woman married to a Muslim man and you were trying to travel from India to Pakistan, you were a target. Hindu and Sikh mobs saw you as a traitor, a woman who'd polluted herself by marrying a Muslim. They'd pull you off trains, drag you out of refugee camps. Sometimes they'd kill you outright. Sometimes they'd abduct you, take you back to India, and restore you to Hinduism, whether you wanted to be restored or not. The same thing happened in reverse. Muslim women married to Hindu men trying to get to India were abducted by Muslim mobs in Pakistan. They'd be forcibly converted back to Islam, married off to Muslim men, and told they were being saved. Saved from what? From the life they'd chosen, from the family they loved. And the children of these women, they were taken too. A Hindu woman abducted in Pakistan might have her half-Muslim children taken away and raised in Muslim households. A Muslim woman abducted in India might have her half-Hindu children taken and raised as Hindus. The governments knew this was happening. Both India and Pakistan signed agreements to recover abducted women and children. They set up official programs. Social workers, police officers, even military personnel were tasked with finding and returning abducted women to their rightful countries. But here's the thing. A lot of these women didn't want to be recovered. Let's say you're a Hindu woman who was abducted in Pakistan in 1947. It's now 1949. You've been living with a Muslim family for 2 years. Maybe you were forced to marry someone. Maybe you had a child with him. Maybe you've built a life, however unwillingly, in this new place. Then the police show up and tell you you're being rescued. You're going back to India, back to your original family, back to a community that will probably shun you for being impure. You don't want to go. You beg to stay. The police don't care. They take you anyway. This happened repeatedly. The recovery programs were supposed to be humanitarian efforts, but in practice, they were often just another form of violence. Women were dragged away from children they'd had with their abductors. They were sent back to families who rejected them. They were treated like damaged goods, like problems to be solved, not like human beings with agency. And if you resisted, if you said, "Actually, I want to stay here," too bad. The governments had decided that your body, your identity, your future belonged to your religion and your nation of origin, not to you. There's recorded cases of women who killed themselves rather than be recovered, women who ran away from the social workers sent to save them, women who, when forced onto trains back to India or Pakistan, jumped off and died. The official numbers say about 30,000 women were recovered between 1947 and 1956. How many of them wanted to be recovered? How many were reunited with families who welcomed them? How many spent the rest of their lives wishing they'd been left alone? We don't know. No one asked them. Now let's talk about the families that made it through partition intact but shattered. Because even if you survived, even if your mixed family stayed together, even if you made it to whichever side of the border you chose, the damage was done. You'd seen things. You'd lost people. You'd been betrayed by neighbors, by friends, sometimes by your own extended family. And that kind of trauma doesn't just go away.
There's an account from a Muslim man in Bombay, now Mumbai, who was married to a Hindu woman. They stayed in India. They didn't flee. They thought they'd be safe because Bombay was relatively cosmopolitan, relatively peaceful compared to Punjab or Bengal. They were mostly right, but the violence still reached them in other ways. His family in Lahore was killed. Her family in Delhi stopped speaking to her. Their children were bullied at school for having a Muslim father. Their neighbors looked at them with suspicion. Every time there was a Hindu-Muslim riot somewhere in the country, they'd get threatening letters, sometimes just notes slipped under their door. Go to Pakistan. You don't belong here. They stayed anyway. They raised their children. They built a life. But the man said in an interview decades later that they never felt safe again, never felt like they fully belonged. They had survived partition, but partition never really left them. And that was common. Mixed families who stayed in India carried the weight of suspicion forever. Were they really loyal to India, or were they secretly sympathizing with Pakistan? Did their Muslim members send money to relatives across the border? Were they a security risk? The same paranoia existed in Pakistan. Hindu members of mixed families in Pakistan were watched, questioned, sometimes harassed. When India and Pakistan went to war in 1965 and again in 1971, life got even harder for them. Suddenly, having a Hindu wife or a Hindu mother made you a potential spy, a traitor, a problem. Some families gave up and left. Hindus in Pakistan slowly migrated to India over the years. Muslims in India, especially in northern regions, trickled into Pakistan. The partition never really ended. It just slowed down. Let's talk about the ones who were separated and spent decades trying to find each other. Because partition didn't just split families physically, it split them legally, bureaucratically, permanently. If your Muslim husband ended up in Pakistan and you ended up in India, you couldn't just visit him. The border was closed. There were no phones, no email, obviously. Letters took weeks if they arrived at all. And if you wanted to visit, you needed a visa, which required proof of identity, which required paperwork, which in the chaos of 1947, most people didn't have. So families were just stuck, separated by a line on a map, unable to reach each other. There are heartbreaking stories of siblings who lost track of each other in 1947 and didn't reunite until the 1990s, 50 years later. A Muslim brother who ended up in Karachi and a Hindu sister who ended up in Delhi. They both survived. They both spent decades wondering if the other was alive. They both tried to find each other through whatever means they could. Red Cross messages, letters to refugee organizations, word of mouth through relatives who might have traveled. When they finally met, they were in their 70s. They didn't recognize each other. They'd become strangers. Let's drift into one of the most impossible situations of all. Mothers who had to decide which children to take and which to leave behind. Because here's a scenario that happened more often than anyone wants to admit. You're a Hindu woman married to a Muslim man. You have 4 children. In August 1947, your husband says the family is moving to Pakistan. You don't want to go. Your family is in India. Your parents are aging. Your siblings are there. But your husband insists. He says it's not safe for Muslims in India anymore. He's probably right. But here's the problem. You have 4 children. 2 of them look Muslim, dark features, your husband's nose, his build. 2 of them look Hindu, lighter skin, your features, your family's face. If you take all 4 children to Pakistan, the 2 who look Hindu might be targeted. If you stay in India with all 4, the 2 who look Muslim might be targeted. What do? Some mothers made the unthinkable choice. They split their children, took the Muslim-looking ones to Pakistan, left the Hindu-looking ones with relatives in India, told themselves it was temporary, told themselves they'd reunite once things calmed down. Things did not calm down. There's a documented case from Punjab, a woman named Kamala, Hindu woman, Muslim husband, 3 children.
In August 1947, her husband insisted they go to Pakistan. She agreed, but she was terrified for her youngest son, who was light-skinned and looked exactly like her father. She left him with her parents in Amritsar, took her other 2 children to Lahore, promised she'd come back for him in a few months. She never made it back. The border hardened. Her parents died in 1950. Her son was raised by her brother. She spent the rest of her life in Lahore, writing letters that were rarely answered, sending money when she could, trying to maintain some connection to a child she'd left behind. Her son grew up angry. He felt abandoned. When she finally got a visa to visit India in 1965, he refused to see her. She died in 1982, never having reconciled with him. He showed up to her funeral. Apparently, he just stood at the back and cried. And then there were the mothers who had to choose between their children and their husbands. Let's say you're a Muslim woman married to a Hindi man. You have 2 children. In August 1947, your family in Pakistan is begging you to come home. They say it's not safe for Muslims in India. They say you need to leave your husband, bring the children, come to Pakistan. Your husband is begging you to stay. He says he'll protect you. He says you're a family. He says he can't lose you. You can't take him to Pakistan. A Hindu man in Pakistan in 1947, he'd be lucky to survive the train ride. You can't send your children alone. They're too young. So you have to choose. Your husband or your family. Your past or your present. Your religion or your marriage. Some women chose their husbands, stayed in India, cut ties with their families in Pakistan, spent the rest of their lives wondering if their parents, their siblings, their cousins were even alive. Some of them never found out. Other women chose their birth families, left their husbands, took their children, went to Pakistan. Some of those husbands followed them anyway, tried to sneak across the border, tried to get visas, tried to find them. Most didn't. And then there were just women who broke. The choice was too much. There are accounts of women who had complete mental breakdowns during partition, women who couldn't decide, couldn't function, couldn't process the impossible situation they were in. Some were left behind because their families couldn't carry them. Some were institutionalized. Some just disappeared into the chaos. There's a story from a refugee camp in Delhi. A Muslim woman, married to a Hindu man with 3 children. She'd been found wandering near the train station, alone, confused, unable to speak. She wouldn't tell anyone her name, wouldn't say where her family was, just kept repeating, "I don't know, I don't know, I don't know." She stayed in that camp for 2 years. Eventually, someone from her village recognized her and contacted her family in Pakistan. They sent her brother to get her. When he arrived, she didn't recognize him. She never recovered. She lived with her family in Karachi for another 10 years, mostly silent, mostly absent. She died in 1958. No one ever found out what happened to her husband or her children. Let's talk about the families who tried to stay neutral, the ones who thought they could just not participate. Because there were families, especially in mixed communities, who thought that if they just kept their heads down, didn't take sides, didn't join the violence, they'd be fine. They were wrong.
In Delhi, there was a neighborhood called Karol Bagh, mixed Hindu-Muslim community. Lots of interfaith marriages, lots of families who'd been intermingled for generations. In early August 1947, the elders of the community held a meeting. They decided they wouldn't evacuate. They wouldn't split up. They'd stay together, protect each other, prove that Hindus and Muslims could coexist. It lasted about 3 weeks. The violence that swept through Delhi in late August didn't care about their ideals. Mobs came through Karol Bagh like everywhere else. Some families barricaded themselves in their homes. Some tried to form neighborhood defense groups. It didn't matter. By September, half the Muslim families were gone. Some had fled to Pakistan. Some were dead. The Hindu families who tried to protect them were accused of being traitors. Some were attacked too. By October, Karol Bagh was almost entirely Hindu. The Muslims who'd stayed were either hiding or pretending to be Hindu. The interfaith families had either split up or fled. The neighborhood never recovered its mixed character. Even today, it's predominantly Hindu. And Karol Bagh wasn't unique. This happened in dozens of neighborhoods across northern India and Pakistan. Communities that had been mixed for centuries were suddenly segregated, often violently. The families that tried to resist, that tried to maintain their mixed identities, were crushed. Now let's talk about the long-term effects, the children of these mixed families who grew up in the aftermath. Because if you were born after 1947 to a mixed family,
You inherited a very specific kind of trauma. Your parents probably didn't talk about partition. It was too painful, too complicated, too shameful maybe. But you knew something was wrong. You knew your father's family was in Pakistan and you'd never met them. You knew your mother had cousins in India she never spoke to. You knew your last name was Muslim, but you were being raised Hindu, or vice versa. You knew you weren't supposed to ask questions. These children grew up confused. They grew up with gaps in their family history, with relatives they'd never meet, with stories that didn't make sense. And when they got older and started asking questions, they often got silence, or lies, or half-truths. There's an account from a man born in 1950 in Karachi. His mother was Hindu, his father was Muslim. He didn't know his mother was Hindu until he was 12. She'd converted when they got married, changed her name, learned to dress and speak and act like a Muslim woman. She never mentioned her family in India. When he found out, he asked her why she never visited them. She just said, "It's complicated." He didn't push. Years later, after she died, he found letters she'd been writing to her sister in Delhi. Dozens of them. None of them had ever been sent. He tried to find his mother's family, spent years searching, eventually tracked down a cousin in Delhi. The cousin told him his mother's parents had disowned her when she married a Muslim. Her siblings had tried to stay in touch, but the distance, the politics, the sheer difficulty of maintaining a relationship across the India-Pakistan border made it impossible. By the time he found them, everyone from his mother's generation was dead. He said in an interview that he felt like he'd been robbed of half his identity, that his mother had been forced to erase herself and he'd inherited that erasure without even knowing it. And that's the thing about partition. It didn't just affect the people who lived through it, it affected their children, their grandchildren. It created generations of people with fractured identities, with missing family trees, with questions that would never be answered. Let's drift over to the issue of guilt, because the survivors of mixed families often carried enormous guilt. If you were a Muslim man who brought your Hindu wife to Pakistan and she spent the rest of her life miserable and isolated, you carried that guilt. If you were a Hindu woman who stayed in India while your Muslim husband's family was killed in Pakistan, you carried that guilt. If you were a parent who split your children between two countries, you carried that guilt. If you survived when your siblings didn't, you carried that guilt. And there was no therapy, no support groups, no language really to talk about what had happened. You just carried it. You buried it. You tried to move on. There's a heartbreaking account from a woman named Zainab, Muslim woman, Hindu husband. They stayed in India. In August 1947, her brother came from Pakistan to try and convince her to leave. She refused. He begged her, said their parents were heartbroken, said she was abandoning her family. She still refused. He left. 2 weeks later, he was killed on a train heading back to Lahore. She found out 6 months later. She spent the rest of her life wondering if she could have stopped him. If she'd gone with him, would he have survived? If she'd convinced him to stay in India, would he still be alive? She never forgave herself. Her husband said she'd wake up in the middle of the night crying, saying her brother's name. She died in 1991. Her last words were apparently, "I'm sorry." Guilt like that doesn't fade. It doesn't heal. It just becomes part of you. And then there's the guilt of the ones who betrayed their own families. Because let's be honest, not everyone was a hero during partition. Some people, faced with impossible choices, made terrible decisions. Some people saved themselves and let their relatives die. Some people informed on their neighbors to protect their own families. Some people abandoned their spouses, their children, their parents, because it was easier than fighting for them. There's a documented case of a Hindu man in Lahore who was married to a Muslim woman. When the violence started, his family in India told him to come home. He went, left his wife and 2 young children behind, told them he'd send for them later. He never did. He remarried in India, started a new family. His first wife spent years trying to find him, writing letters, sending messages through relatives. When she finally tracked him down in the 1950s, he refused to see her, told her to stop contacting him. She died alone in Lahore in 1963.